Yeah, there's only been one. So yeah, oh, he's leaving. Okay.
Yeah, he's going to an engineering meeting.
Okay. Fun times. Yay! This is the Hack Fraud Show. We're back.
Yay! After how many weeks? Has it been 2 weeks or 3 weeks?
I think it's been a 3-week break since the last show. I'm not sure. I'd have to check, but
we'll see.
2 or 3 weeks. But we're back, and we're thrilled to be back. I think.
I want to talk about some movies.
Yeah, I've missed this actually. Like I had a lot of free time the last week, and I had no podcast to edit, and I was it was a little depressing to tell you the truth. But we're back now, and I realized we did not inform all of you what our topic was going to be because we decided to make it a surprise. So surprise! It's John Ford Western Week.
Yay!
Also,
this is our return to academic form after reviewing Phineas and Ferb and fucking SpongeBob.
Which was a pretty good episode, I think.
I like that episode, but anytime you say, yeah, we reviewed SpongeBob, your credibility goes...
Hey. Matt Zoller Seitz and Alan Sepinwall, who are like two of the most respected TV critics maybe ever, just put out a book called TV the Book, and... in it, they have a list of, like, the 100 best TV shows or something, and SpongeBob is on that list.
Oh, how high? I'd imagine it'd be, like, low.
I'm not sure.
50s.
I don't know. I haven't read the book, but SpongeBob is on the cover, so,
Oh. It has impact to television.
No.
Oh, goodness.
Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, yes.
You were, like, how you watched the South Park movie?
Oh, well, also surprise, both the Garretts aren't here.
I'm worried this might become a reoccurring thing, but...
That was always bound to happen. But anyway, it's been a while, so let's catch up on what we've been watching. TM and copyright The Hack Fraud Show.
Totally original.
Yes, completely. As we were talking about just moments ago, I watched South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. The 1999 feature film, and it's actually very good. I've gotten heavy into South Park recently. The show is actually, it started its 20th season a few weeks ago, and it's really on a hot streak right now.
That's good.
Surprisingly sharp and very in tune with the events of the day, as South Park tends to be.
I don't know, to me, I guess, like, part of why I've never really been into South Park, mostly because I thought it's kind of, it's a satirical show that I think went just a bit too far into, hey, shock value for shock value's sake.
That is true.
But maybe I just haven't watched the right ones.
Yeah, I think it was especially like that in their earlier years, and it still does kind of slip in it. But I think its shock value has faded a lot, especially considering the kind of stuff that's out there now. But... Mm-hmm. They as last week's episode showed, they can still slip in a rather impressive gross out gag every now and then.
That's their... So it's good to see South Park is still going 20 seasons strong.
Yeah.
As very few shows ever do.
It's true.
Any show has.
Like when you look at how far The Simpsons has fallen, it's surprising that South Park has been able to maintain such a level of quality.
Maybe I should check out South Park if I can find the time.
And yeah, the movie is good. The movie is a surprisingly sharp satire of like censorship and parenting and other things. And the songs in it will get stuck in your head like nothing else. They've always been very good songwriters, and I think they were actually nominated for an Oscar for one of the songs from the movie.
I think you're right. I think that was a thing. Yeah. These guys did do Book of Mormon, so...
Yes. Which is coming to L.A. Over the summer, and I hope I can get a ticket, but we'll see what happens with that.
Let's see. What have I seen this week? Okay, I've seen quite a few things as I watch, because of all the stuff I have to watch for class. So I'm just going to limit it to the 3 most interesting things. One of which I saw last night. First of all I saw Boyhood, finally.
Yes. Didn't we talk about that on the last one? Or
no, because I think I saw Boyhood after.
Okay.
Okay, first of all, I guess I think this is kind of, anytime you want to critique Boyhood, you have to put this caveat at the beginning of it. The technique is really impressive. Richard Linklater has as many balls as any man for deciding, hey, I'm going to take the same actors and film a movie over the course of 12 years. And I'm not going to have some super intricate plot. It's just going to be kind of this slice of life thing. And all the credit in the world for him for trying that. That's incredible. No one else is ever going to try it again. But to me, I think my issue with it, well, first of all, I think I found a place where that technique might have actually hurt the movie. Which is a case of, like, this is a movie that seems to be, like, the way it goes through time. It doesn't do a lazy thing and show 2008 or 2012 or anything like that. Mm. It tries to do it through the sort of pop culture of the time. Like, if you want to know it's 2012, they play a song from 2012. If they're, like, at one point, they tell you it's 2008, they have an Obama sign they stick into the ground. And the best joke in the movie is they're stealing McCain signs along the way with their father. And I realized this, that because you're making it as these events happen, but you're still stitching them together like it's a kind of pseudo-period piece, you really don't have anything to say about these events. Mm-hmm. And these events just come, you go, hey, I remember that, and move on. Which to me kind of seems exemplary of the movie as a whole, as far as it's too tied to, like, this kind of slow-moving slice of life realism, but it still has, like, these really melodramatic characters. Like, you have the drunk stepdad who really doesn't fit. Like, half the time the mother seems to be having an existential crisis, which seems like that. And so like, it's not really realistic because if you have characters and you have these cliches you've seen a billion times before. But it also, it's too tied to realism. Like, everything's shot like a documentary. It has, like, a very slow-moving pace. It can't really develop its melodrama. Like, the kid you see in the movie starts out having no character, and then at some point just turns into a Richard Linklater bullshit philosophizer. And, like, all his character development is, like, people telling him what he should do. And a lot of things happen to him throughout his life. But he seems to have very little reaction to any of it. Like, there is a very small sense of growth with that character, which is weird because we see him grow up through 12 years. I mean, so I think it's...
I mean, I get what you're saying. I mean, I don't want to get into a big argument about this movie because we have to talk about John Ford movies, but I just think that, like, you know, this movie I think is supposed to be kind of representative of a real life more than anything, and not every movie has to do that, and not every movie should do that. But I think when a movie pulls that off, which this movie definitely does, I think it's something to be really celebrated and examined. I think.
I think, like, well, granted, it's certainly a movie worth study. It's certainly a movie worth looking into. I mean, no one's ever going to do this again. Yeah. And the fact that he did this, I think that's worth all the credit in the world. I will say a weird thing about this. Like, I remember thinking about, like, who was it going to be, when Boyhood was going to win, people thought Boyhood was going to win Best Picture.
Yes.
And Birdman actually won. And I think, well, we'll get to that. I realized this, and I remember thinking, okay, maybe I think Birdman's the better movie for a whole slew of different reasons, but that's a difficult thing.
Well, I think we can all agree that the actual Best Picture of 2014 was The Grand Budapest Hotel.
Yes. I think we're on that train. But, like, Birdman was this kind of look at celebrity culture as it was happening in 2014. But still in a kind of classic Hollywood way, that sort of thing. Whereas Boyhood is this look through the past 12 years as it was happening. But I'm going to put the dividing line. I think Boyhood isn't going to age as well as Birdman because Boyhood just doesn't have anything to say about the events that happen. And I think when we look back at it, like maybe 10, 20 years from now, we're going to see that. Whereas a Birdman, it might be dated, but it's still going to be kind of this interesting look of what we thought of celebrity culture and things like that in 2014.
I mean, we've had this argument before, notably when we were standing in line for a ride at Cedar Point. But what was I saying? I just disagree because I mean I haven't watched Boyhood in a while. I do need to go back and watch it again, but every time I've rewatched Birdman, I've liked it less than I did before. And the more I think about it, the more I realize like how, that movie is really pretentious in a very unpleasant way. And I don't know. Inarritu is an interesting character, and seeing The Revenant, I think, made me really kind of question it even more because The Revenant just had nothing going for it, in my opinion.
I'd be like if I didn't feel the same way. I'm just saying like Birdman is the more interesting movie, at least to me. But that's my controversial opinions of Boyhood, the almost universally praised movie.
Yes. In conclusion,
I don't have any anger over Boyhood. So. Over people loving Boyhood.
Yeah. Well, suffice it to say, Boyhood just came out on Criterion, so go buy it.
But it's a movie worth studying. I'm completely fine with that. Next movie I watched. This is pretty obscure, but I think it's just a really interesting movie. It's a World War II movie called Europa.
Oh, okay.
And it's amazingly enough, it's based on a true story. It's about like there's this Jewish boy who lives in Germany, and when Kristallnacht happens, the family goes, shit, we need to go to Poland. Then the Germans invade Poland, and they go, okay, we're going to stay here. You and your brother are going to go to Russia, and you're going to stay there. And we know how that goes, if anyone knows history. Like, well, at one point, like, the boy actually goes to, like, a Soviet school, and he's taught in the communist ways. But then the Germans invade, and he has to hide the fact that he's a Jew, and he says, I'm Volksdeutsch, I'm a true German, I'm an ethnic German, just to get him through the ranks. And he then ends up being a translator with the Wehrmacht. They then send him back to Germany to be a part of the Hitler Youth, because now he's kind of a war hero, because he was with the Wehrmacht. And now he's literally a Jewish boy inside the Hitler Youth. Like, at one point, there's a scene where they call him up and they measure his head because, you can always tell who the Jew is by measuring their heads. And they go, they measure his head and they say, you are a Nordic man. It's kind of a dark, it's kind of a dark comedy, even though almost most of his family's killed. It's still kind of a dark comedy. Like, there's this hallucinatory scene where Stalin and Hitler are dancing in a waltz. And there's another scene where they go, oh, you have to hide him. And then they point to it, a man dressed as Hitler. Oh, he's a Jew. Go hide him. And it's also, the fascinating thing about it is, like, this is based on a real man. And to be honest, from when I looked into it, not that much was made up for the movie. Like, the bit where, like, the teacher measuring his head and saying, you're a German, that actually happened. He met with the teacher later on. And, like, apparently he had, like, the man himself appears at the end of the movie in the last shot. So I think, like, the man's name is Solomon Perel. He's, like, a fascinating man. And I think that's just a fascinating movie that's no one's heard it about because it was banned in Germany. Oh. But I think that was just a quick spotlight I wanted to give to that. And the last movie I wanted to talk about is the recent one that came out, The Birth of a Nation.
Oh, you saw that? How is it?
I saw it last night.
Should I skip it?
Oh, I don't know. Well, here's the problem. When Reed, me, and Matthew saw it, we were the only ones in the theater. So there was kind of a running commentary going over it. Of course. But it was, like, it's a case of that movie it's the director's first movie. It's Nate Parker. It's his first movie. I think it's the first movie he's written. And he also acts in it, and he plays a character who they literally compare to Jesus constantly. Like, do you remember the Man of Steel, like, Jesus Christ stained glass Henry Cavill goes over?
Yeah.
That practically happens in The Birth of a Nation, where he kills his slave master by the light of a stained glass window with a cross on it. And, like, there was bits of, like... There's, like, bits of genius in its directing. Like, there's a bit where it's like he starts off as a kid and they show him growing up through, like, it's like a match cut between him picking cotton. Like, there's the first time he's ever picked cotton, and then it match cuts to him today, and he's doing the same activity. That's clever. it's got this really strange visual style where everyone's like in ultra focus, but it's also really shallow focus, so like nothing else is in focus. You can just only see the face. Which when anyone else did it, I'd be like, oh, that's intentional. But with a first-time director, I'm thinking, did he not know about other focal lengths? Because I realized, like, wait a minute, this is kind of like when I just exclusively use deep focus because it's the easiest thing for me to use. And there's also like a weird thing where like all the horrible, disgusting white people are also made horrible, disgusting white people physically. Like everyone has grease on them, and everyone's like sniffling and has horrible facial hair. So it's a fascinating movie, but I'm not too sure how good it is. I think it's something worth watching because it's just interesting to watch, but I'm not too sure how much else I can really say to it. Right. It's like it's got really good things about it, but there's like there's kind of a technical inadequacy to it, and there's like its imagery is like really on the nose and really ham-handed, whereas I think we know the story of slavery. I think you could have gotten a lot more done via a whisper than this movie does through screaming.
I just think it's interesting how, like, slavery movies are the new Holocaust movie. Like, every Oscar season now, we're getting some kind of a slavery movie.
Yeah, and that's strange. I don't know, like, and to me, I realize, like, I've kind of seen this imagery. You could have, I don't know, I have some issues with it, but I think it's certainly something worth seeing. Like, the title, like, what they did with the title, and how every time you look up D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation, you get this movie as well.
Right.
That's interesting. Like there was kind of a direct reference to a scene in the original Birth of a Nation where a white man requests one of his slaves to come sleep with him, which is kind of like a kind of reversal of what happens in Birth of a Nation. So like it's an interesting movie. I'm not entirely sure if I can fully recommend it.
All right. Well, I may end up seeing it. I may not. We'll see what happens with that.
If your friends for some fucking reason want to go and see it,
well,
tag along.
We're just really desperate to like go see a movie because like there's nothing out right now, and
nothing.
The next movie that I actively want to see, there's actually two that come out the same weekend, and it's not till the first weekend of November, which is Doctor Strange and Mel Gibson's Hacksaw Ridge, which I've heard good things about.
Oh yeah, Hacksaw Ridge looks fascinating. That looks like Mel Gibson is an insane director, so what he does is always going to at least be interesting.
Yeah.
But we actually want to talk about the movies we were slated to talk about this week.
I feel like in keeping with the Western theme, I also rewatched Django Unchained a couple days ago. Still, it's a very interesting movie to talk about because that movie I think has a lot of flaws that are very interesting to break down and talk about. But I don't want to get too deep into it here. But it's still my least favorite Quentin Tarantino movie that I've seen, and I still think the whole last half hour of that movie is just dead. But it is, every time I watch it, it is far more entertaining than I remembered it being, so.
I don't know, like, it seems to be like the past few Tarantino movies, maybe going back since, maybe like Inglourious Basterds, maybe before then, is like no one's telling Tarantino no.
Yeah.
Is that a good thing? Probably not, but it's creating interesting movies with a lot of talking points.
Well, I think Inglourious Basterds is like maybe the most perfect movie he's ever going to make, so I
do too, but I think that's.
I mean, and I loved The Hateful Eight, but you know.
To me, like, this case of like, are they? I think these are these. I'm not too sure if these are his best movies, but they're the ones with the most things to talk about.
Yeah, I will say
Django Unchained has far more things to talk about than Pulp Fiction.
That is true, and I will say I'm not sure if Hateful Eight is going to have like the rewatchability factor of Django or Bastards, but it was quite something to see that movie the first time and even the second time.
Like, out of all the movies I saw in 2015, Jake, The Hateful Eight is the one I remember probably the most. Whatever that says.
All right, so let's talk some John Ford here.
Ford, baby. Do we want to talk about the fun movie or the interesting movie?
Well, I mean, we're going to have to talk about the book. I guess we can talk about the fun one first. Just first, a bit of background. John Ford I think he's actually like one of my dad's favorite directors, strangely, but I haven't seen that many movies by him. I think Ford got his start fairly early in Hollywood. He was directing movies in the silent era.
Yeah, didn't he get his start in like 1925 or something?
Like maybe even earlier. And then he became very famous for his westerns, which he often shot on location in Monument Valley.
He's one of the first people to do that.
Frequently starring John Wayne. And we examined two of those movies today. Previously, I had seen one other one called The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, which we should really cover on this podcast sometime because that is a very interesting movie.
I don't know, like I have very little experience of John Ford. Like most of the things I know about John Ford is through like what I've learned about Orson Welles. Like apparently Welles watched Stagecoach a copious amount of times before he made Citizen Kane, and like apparently he also, not unlike Welles, John Ford shot no coverage. Like he just shot exactly what he needed and just shipped it to the editor. He would never give them a choice of what they could cut to. Which is interesting. But like, yeah, I think Stagecoach was the first John Ford movie I've ever seen. Like, I think he's kind of in the same boat with like Howard Hawks for me, whereas like they're both like 30s, like 30s, 40s era filmmakers who are really influential, but I just haven't seen that many films of.
I haven't seen anything by Howard Hawks.
Howard Hawks is interesting. I think my favorite thing of his is I think His Girl Friday, which is like this newsroom spoof. Which
I really do want to see that because I've heard a lot about like the kind of like workplace banter that kind of goes on in the movie.
Yeah, like His Girl Friday is a lot of fun. I think didn't he also do Bringing Up Baby?
I think so, and that's been on my DVR for like 3 years, and I haven't watched it.
Yeah, I should probably take a look. If I really loved His Girl Friday, so maybe I should take a look at that.
All right. Well,
as far as like, so do we want to talk about Stagecoach first?
Yeah, I think so. Just one other thing about Ford. He won 4 Oscars for Best Director, none of which was for a Western, actually. Oh. And he also directed How Green Was My Valley, which notoriously beat Citizen Kane for Best Picture.
Oh, shit, yeah, that was that one. That was what won that year. Well, to quote Clay Keller, Kane won the important one, Best Original Screenplay.
That's true. All right, so Stagecoach.
It's a Western.
You know, both of the movies I think that we watched this week were very entertaining. I think this was this movie's a lot of fun and has a lot of very interesting things in it.
You have Ford's surrogate fuck the Republican character. Like you just have this awful caricature of a character constantly spouting the Republican platform of the time, and then he just gets arrested at the end.
Yes.
Which is interesting.
I wonder if Bernie likes this movie. Because you just have this fat cat banker who is literally the fattest character in the movie, just who steals money from his bank and just rides off on a stagecoach and is arrested at the end.
Government should be run like a business.
Oh, don't even with that.
That's that. What else is there?
I don't know, but yeah, this movie is kind of like the John Ford origin story. Like, it was his first big like sound western. It was the first one he really shot on location. The first big starring role for John Wayne. So it's interesting just because like it kind of has this interesting structure where like they just throw a bunch of strangers together who have like mild connections to each other on a stagecoach and just run the stagecoach like through dangerous territory.
I mean, it kind of feels like light Tarantino, where it's like let's just throw them together. They kind of have connections with each other.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Like, this movie kind of feels like The Hateful Eight a little bit,
at least in its structure and its character, in some of its character dynamics.
Yeah.
I like you have John Wayne looking as beautiful as he ever will. I think an interesting thing I found is that because I think knowing that Wells took some of what Ford took Ford as an influence. I tried to look for the Wellesian bits in this. Things I found is like the acting's a bit more theatrical than a normal movie. Like I also noticed this, like if maybe I'm just used to Howard Hawks, but Howard Hawks has his camera far back, like you can usually see most of the person. Whereas I think Ford's camera is a bit closer. He's a bit closer to people.
Yeah.
Even in like just normal talk, in normal conversation. Another thing I noticed, and this is something weird, because one of the things they'll teach you about Citizen Kane is that that's a movie where ceilings are a factor. Like they built sets of ceilings. But right here we are in Stagecoach. Anytime you go inside, there's a ceiling. Like they built, either they just went to a place, either they built a set or they just went to a place that had ceilings and you see them. Yeah. Which is interesting. That's just some technical stuff I saw where I kind of see, oh, that's where Wells pulled it.
Yeah, like I think they shot this movie partially on location, then partially like on some kind of like movie ranch somewhere.
Like you see the Wild West town, which is obviously set somewhere.
Yeah. But I think this movie has pretty impressive production value, especially I think this movie came out in like 1939. Which, man, like, what a year for movies. I think
Ford has a great eye for black and white cinematography.
Yeah.
But also, I think there's also some really damn good action, which you don't expect from 1939.
That
like, the scenes where they're on the stagecoach getting shot at, that's genuinely thrilling.
That last big action sequence is, like very impressive. It's just a great chase sequence, like... You know where everything is. You know what's going on. Although it does start with a kind of ridiculous moment where one of the characters is shot with an arrow, like through the window of the stagecoach, and no one notices until like the camera goes back to him, and there's just an arrow sticking out of his chest. But regardless,
like there's a point where you think, wait a minute, I don't know how they did this, but there's a bit where it literally looks like there's a camera on a horse.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they couldn't have done that then, but goddamn it, is it convincing?
Yeah. Yeah, no, this movie is very technically impressive. I think the characters are all like very, very well sketched, at least some of them.
Lively. They're not the deepest, but it's a case where you have all these people bouncing off of each other.
Yeah.
It is kind of like a comedy where it's like these characters aren't the deepest. It's all about what is our dynamics between them.
Yeah.
It's kind of modern.
I mean, yeah, it's I don't know if I have too much to say. Just this movie was it's very enjoyable to watch. It's very interesting. You have a lot of like kind of interesting character dynamics and like I don't know if this movie like has like maybe the deepest themes. Like I'm trying to think of what.
No.
I mean, I think the main kind of arc in this is like John Wayne's character, the Ringo kid, is like
and him finding like
him kind of falling in love with this other character who is never said.
It's a really interesting dynamic.
Yeah. Also, like the Dallas character, I think is never said in so many words, but I think she's supposed to be a prostitute.
Yeah, that's the thing where it's like she doesn't want to tell him about her past and so on and so forth.
But yeah, then they kind of fall in love, but like John Wayne is also like looking for revenge for like on these brothers who like shot his family or something like that.
Yeah, that seems about the thing, and he does get revenge on them.
Yes, he does.
Which is really that's like it's to me it's a Western. It's not really the deepest thing in the world, but like you're with these characters, you like these characters. It's just a fun time. The action's good. It feels satisfying. Like when the movie ends, you go, "Wow, this was a complete cinematic experience that I have just witnessed."
Yeah, which is all too rare these days.
Yeah, and it's in 1939 of all places.
Right, and also I think like a lot of the kind of Western tropes that we think of, I think were maybe kind of cemented or invented by John Ford and by this movie. Like this is a very prototypical Western, and I imagine it probably did a lot of these things first.
I think I remember reading like the Roger Ebert review when he said like some people criticize how stereotypical it is, but he said, "Well, it invented this. What do you want from it?"
Yeah.
So I think that's Stagecoach. It's not the deepest movie. I wouldn't call it the most interesting movies we've watched. Well, like I think there's enough depth there to get you through it. Like there are some characters, but like the John Wayne character is genuine depth. Like the supposed prostitute character is genuine depth.
Yeah, and I enjoyed the doctor, the drunk doctor who kind of
doctor's a lot of fun.
Randomly dispenses moments of wisdom for somehow.
That's a great bait and switch. You have this character who is almost caricaturish in how drunk he is, but then he'll just occasionally say something brilliant.
Yes. Also, like that sequence where like he has to deliver the baby. What is up with?
Fascinating.
What? Because like they don't seed that at all. And she doesn't like the woman doesn't look pregnant. It's just all of a sudden like, oh, there's a baby.
And there was no inclination at all. Like, maybe the dresses were just different then. I don't know, but there's just no inclination that she's pregnant.
Like that.
So when the baby's born, I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah, like that caught me so off guard. Like I actually like rewound the movie and was like went back and was like, wait, what?
Like, same thing. I was so confused.
But you know, it works out fine. It adds kind of another layer to things.
It's a wrinkle on things. It's why they have to stay.
Yeah, and it also kind of adds another interesting layer to Dallas because she kind of develops this kind of relationship with the mother and with the baby, and that's kind of interesting. But
yeah, it's a movie. One of the things I think this is a very positive attribute about movies. It's a movie driven by characters, not truly by plot.
Yeah,
like the basic plot is we need to get these people to this place with the Indians, so they can get shot at, and we can have this cool action scene. Everything else is just character dynamics and watching people bounce off each other, and they're good characters, and it's good dynamics, so it's fun to watch.
Which is great. Yeah, it's This really is I didn't really think about it, but yeah, like the plot of this is pretty minimal. It's like get from point A to point B with like various stops along the way and
get shot by the Indians, get the brother shot, etc., etc.
So, yeah, Stagecoach. It's
a fun time.
It's a lot of fun, which is good. We were not.
I was worried about this week.
You were worried we were going to be let down again.
I was worried I was gonna get a film that's like every Western I've ever seen before, and no, I got something genuinely fun.
Yeah,
which was nice.
So, shall we move on to The Searchers? 1950. When did this movie come out? 1950.
I think it's 56.
Okay, that sounds right.
I think it's 56. I'll start with this. It's fucking gorgeous. I think sort of Ford's technical eye is just wonderful. Even the day for night just looks stunning at times. Like there's one point you get this close up of John Wayne, and there's just so much there's just in that close up there's so much layers and so much just emotion in his face. So yeah, it is a feast for the eyes. No matter what, you can put it on mute and just and still have a good time just watching it.
Yep. This is his big Technicolor extravaganza in VistaVision, which sounds like it should be ultra widescreen, but actually isn't. But
well, that's a weird thing. Like I was almost gonna go into this and think, ooh, what Wells comparisons are gonna go to this and I said, oh, wait a minute, Wells never did Technicolor. He never did this. This is out the window.
So this movie is interesting because I think this is generally like kind of agreed in the film community to be Ford's masterpiece, and to be like maybe like
some people quote "Who Shot Liberty Valance" or
but this one
I say Stagecoach.
I think this one is generally like pretty much put at the top. I think though it's
always near the top somewhere.
It was like number 12 in the last AFI poll, so so this movie has quite a lot of love for it.
I think I read a review by Martin Scorsese of all people, and like he said, like there's quite a few scholarly critics who consider this like the most important genre piece in American cinema. And you can see some of its, at least in its look, is almost universal. A whole bunch of westerns look like this. It created the. I think, did it create the Western trope of big, beautiful, colorful vistas in the desert?
I would imagine that it probably did. If it didn't, it at least cemented it. But yeah, this movie is very, very interesting. It's got really a lot of depth to it. And maybe problematic for a lot of reasons. I mean, not least for the obvious thing of like Hollywood's depiction of Native Americans is never a good thing, but
yeah, but like this, I see it as to me. It almost seems like you have this. It's so weird because like it has the makings of a look at a horrifying character. Like here is a character study about like a deeply troubled man.
Mm.
But that deeply troubled man is played by John Wayne, who is eminently likable. The Indians you portray are all. There's like this weird scene where they go to like captured white women, and they're just talking gibberish, and like their eyes are out to here, and it's such a weird scene. And you also have whitewashing because like Chief Scar is played by a German American.
Yeah. I mean, that's just to be expected in films of this period.
That's just to be expected, but he's the only one, it looks like, at least.
Okay, well, that's good.
Which is weird. So, like, there's kind of like this fascinating dichotomy of it's trying to be a normal 1950s Western, but it also has, like, this fascinating racist main character.
Yeah, and
it knows it knows that, too. It knows this is a troubled character.
Yeah. I mean, Ethan Edwards, who is played by John Wayne, is a fascinating character. Like he's right from the beginning, like you see like how racist he is, and it's not treated. It's very much clearly painted in a negative light. And you know like you have this character who is kind of like his partner throughout the movie, Marty, I think is his name. Not really his nephew. Like he was like his parents were killed, and like the Edwards family kind of took him in, so he's like kind of like Tom Hagen in The Godfather, I guess. But like John Wayne like makes a big thing of that. He's like, she's not really your aunt, and I'm not your uncle, and la da da da. She's not your sister. All that stuff. Then like he's like 1/8 Cherokee or something like that, and like John Wayne just can't even stand that.
Look like a damn half breed.
Yeah. Also something interesting I read. This isn't like a fan theory. Like supposedly it's like supported by the film. There's like speculation that like Debbie is actually Ethan's daughter. Like apparently like there's signs in the movie that like Ethan is in love with Martha, and I think it said like Debbie is 8 years old when Ethan first shows up, and he's been gone for 8 years. So
that's fascinating.
Which that is really not like lingered on by the movie, and I think it's kind of more in the subtext, but that does add a very interesting layer to things.
Ooh, intrigue. Like it's really, but this is also a film that this horrifying character also walks the line of, this guy's kind of a badass too.
Well,
there's a scene where he leaves the room by dumping alcohol on a fire, and the fire blows up, and I think the movie's trying to portray that as, he's a badass.
I mean, I think he's kind of like an early example, in cinema anyway, of an anti-hero.
Yeah.
Where, like, you root for this guy and you like him, even though he's clearly, like, not a good guy.
Yeah. But I think in a way that like the rest of the film around him makes that problematic. Like you still have the Hollywood ending.
Yeah.
Whereas like there's the last shot of this movie is fascinating, in that like he gives them the girl they go and save.
Well,
the door shut on him, and he's in pure silhouette.
Well, what's interesting actually is like, I thought I knew how this movie ended. Like, I had seen some spoilers. I knew that, like, they found Debbie, and, like, she was, like, it had been years, and she had been, like, kind of assimilated into the Native American culture.
He doesn't kill her.
And, like, John Wayne wants to kill her. Like, I knew all that was going to happen. But I thought that was the end of the movie. Like, I thought they were just going to leave her there and just go back. But no, there's, like, 40 more minutes after that of, like... Yeah. And then this is yet another movie, kind of like Rear Window, which we talked about in our Hitchcock episode, where like there's it feels like they had to like tack on a Hollywood ending, and that kind of like subverts or like undercuts like the all the brilliance that's going on in the rest of the movie.
like you have like there's this weirdly comedic raid of the Indians.
Yeah.
Where it's like, watch your knife, boy. Which seems like really it's well done, of course, because it's John Ford action.
Well,
but it's also like really out of place and really off tone.
Well, and then the other thing is that like when they first find Debbie, she's like, "No, I live with these are my people now. Like, go home, just leave me here." But then they come back and get her, and she's like, "Okay." It's like, what?
Well, apparently, if I'm not to be mistaken, the book this is based off really goes all in on its horrifying ideas. Which I think John Ford is aware of, and maybe like the studio said, Warner Brothers were saying, wait a minute, you want a hero that's not really that heroic? No!
Right. Like, we have to have the happy ending, and
We have to have the colorful fight at the end.
Yeah. It's hard to tell with these older movies, because you really don't know, like, how much the studio had to say in this, but... Well,
this is the full swing of the studio system, so...
That's true.
They at least had some say in it. Like, some directors... Like, the thing about it is, the more... I'm not entirely sure if because I know John Ford had quite a few hits before this. He was one of Warner Brothers' big filmmakers, but how much power did he actually have at this point? And we're never going to know because of how just closed in those systems were.
This was before the dawn of the auteur system, and even if I think you were a fairly powerful director, which Ford I'm sure was.
Oh yeah.
Like, I'm not sure how much impact you could actually have, like, over the studio, but I don't know, the ending, you know, I would say, kind of undercuts the rest of the movie somewhat, but the rest of the movie is still there and is, I think, actually still quite brilliant.
I don't. Here's the thing: this conflict, I don't think undermines what the movie is saying. If anything, it kind of creates this question throughout the movie: is this movie subversive or is it horrifying?
Right.
Because, like, the Indians, the way they portray the Indians is that, like, in Stagecoach, they're kind of this like, generic threat. There's this kind of thing, you're like, oh, it's this generic movie threat. Whereas in The Searchers, they make a deliberate point of, these are people you hate. Even more so than, like, not even just in the eyes of the John Wayne character, we as an audience are supposed to not like these Indians. Which I think is how it's coded. Even if you ignore, like there's a scene where, like, John Ford shoots out the eyes of a dead Indian, so he'll be wandering around forever. And that's not quite treated as, like, this horrifying thing as it actually is.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's just because, like, the rest of the characters, like, aren't super, like, you know, modern in their attitudes toward.
They're fairly like, well, I think, and that's fine. Like, having characters who have, like, views reminiscent of the time.
Yeah.
But what that gives you is that there really isn't a counterpoint for John Wayne.
Yeah.
Which is something where apparently that's something that a later there's a later Western he made in the mid '60s that apparently that's kind of his revisionist version of this, where he gives a genuine counterpoint.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
And tries to help his portrayal of Indians. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of like when D.W. Griffith made his anti-racist film Intolerance. Not nearly as bad, but
I mean, I don't know. I just think it's interesting to have a character who is, like, so unabashedly racist in a movie of this time, and to have the movie kind of look at this and say, like, look at this, like, very interesting, you know, and very troubled and incorrect character with very...
In a time where fuck the Indians was just a common thing in Westerns.
Right.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. And, you know, I think this movie is also really interesting because, like, their search takes years. Like, this movie takes place across, like, 5 years or something. And, like...
Like, there's the letters he sends to the girl. I won't be able to make it
you go through a few winters. Like, there's a point where, like, they lose the trail in the middle of winter. They're just defeated and they have to go back. It's interesting. Like, this movie just it takes a lot of, like, turns that you would not expect from a movie of this time period.
There's also a lot of interesting technical stuff. I've already spoke to the final shot, which I think is fascinating. But there's also a weird thing, like when Chief. I think there's at one point John Ford and his nephew is being chased by like the Indians, and they hide behind a rock, and there's like this shot of them running into the cave, and like the Indians coming down the hill. Later on, when they try and get Debbie, that exact shot happens again. Instead, it's now Debbie's running into the cave, and John Ford and John Wayne's coming down the hill. Which I think is, I'm not entirely sure what he's trying to say with that, considering all the periphery of the movie. But like that's a fascinating idea.
Yeah, and John Wayne's arc is kind of interesting, just because like he would rather shoot his niece / possible daughter than have her live like in the Indian culture, and but then at the end, like, he's like, okay, let's go home, and I don't know like what that says, honestly. Like I'm not sure if you totally
treated like suspense.
I'm not sure if you
the suspense of that scene is, will he kill his own niece?
Right. And I'm not sure like really how much like actual like progress as a character John Wayne has in this movie, but
if any at all. And I'm worried. One of the questions I ask is, was there supposed to be growth for him?
Right.
Was that what it was? John Ford saying, is this going to be like one of those character studies where the character just doesn't change?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, this is easy to say. This is a fascinating movie.
It definitely is. Like there's a lot of very interesting things going on underneath the surface, and even on the surface. But I don't know. It's hard for me to say that this is like a total masterpiece. I mean, certainly as a piece of filmmaking, it's outstanding, and
it's so gorgeous.
Just it's a fascinating movie to watch and to talk about. But I don't know. I mean, certainly I agree with its place in the kind of best movies ever canon more than like Rear Window. But
yeah, I think there's far more interesting things happening here than there are in most Hitchcock films. And I think Hitchcock is often put above Ford on a lot of levels.
Yeah.
So, do I fully recommend it?
I think it's a movie that people should definitely watch. Like, I think I read something that some critic wrote that like this movie is like the most famous movie that like nobody has seen or something like that.
Like, and I'm certainly going to say I think everyone should see this movie, but I'm worried, like, am I saying that because I genuinely enjoyed the movie, or because the experience it gave me was just so fascinating, just so puzzling? I can't perceive. I want everyone to see it so I can talk about it with them.
Well,
I'm genuinely not sure.
I mean, I guess you're saying you're like torn between like whether you enjoyed the movie or just the experience of watching the movie.
Yeah.
Well, I guess
or at least like the questions it's asking and what qualms it gave me. Like I remember texting you halfway through it, is this movie subversive or is it horrifying? And you told me they've been discussing that since it came out.
Yeah. I don't know. I would recommend it because I just think it's very entertaining, and it's also very, very fascinating, and it's a movie that like, yeah, I think really not that many people have seen it. I think people kind of tend to avoid it for some reason.
Maybe because it's just like people see it as this troubling movie, as like this troubling, oh god, this is what the 50s thought about the Indians, and I don't think that's what it is.
No,
at least not entirely. So yeah, like I definitely I want everyone to go and see it. Whether you're going to enjoy it, you might. I think it's something to say. I'm not really going to make fun of people if you found it horrifying. If you looked at this and if you found John Ford agreeing with the Ethan character.
I mean, I have a friend who I think like hates this movie, but I think it's because he doesn't see like any character development. He said something like, it's famous because the first shot and the last shot are the same, and that's like exactly right because everyone's in the same place they started at the end of the movie. But
that might be the point.
I mean, I think that's the point. Yeah.
So yeah, this might be one of the more fascinating films we've watched on this show.
I think so.
So yeah, I'm certainly I think people who watch this are going to be enriched by it. So yeah, I do recommend this.
Definitely not
a pretty hearty recommendation.
Definitely not every movie in the kind of great movies canon is this interesting. Like with something like maybe Casablanca, which I love Casablanca, but like all you really can say about that movie is
classic Hollywood.
Like that movie's great, and then like what else is there?
There's not really much. There's not really much to ask outside of that beautiful scene where they scare the Nazis out with La Marseillaise. But this like has a lot of like moral qualms about worldview, qualms about race relations. It's qualms about and internal qualms about how do we portray the Indians. Oh God, we have to cast a German. So, oh goodness, what are we going to do next week?
Well, next week is our last episode before Halloween.
Yeah, you're right.
So, I think it's time to make good on our promise to examine an all-time classic of horror, which you have not seen.
Here's Johnny!
Yes, Stanley Kubrick's The Shining.
You know what the weirdest part about all this is? My dad and my mother watch The Shining probably about once a year, but I've never seen it. I never watched it with them. I don't know why.
The Shining is very, very interesting, and
Kubrick, of course, it's interesting.
Well, a couple of my roommates haven't seen it either, so I think we're going to watch it this week anyway. So,
will we have guest stars?
Probably not, but maybe if neither of the Garretts can make it again, I could bring one of them on. But
we haven't really have any concrete second movie we want to watch.
No, I mean The Shining is long, but it's very entertaining, so I think it won't be too much of a chore to watch.
No, I was thinking of like maybe those like the original like Universal movie monster films are pretty short. Like maybe I was thinking about maybe doing like the Universal Frankenstein.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of those.
1831. I haven't seen that one, and I mentioned I've heard like the original Dracula isn't very good.
Yeah.
I've heard like it's influential, but just as a movie, it's not very good. I've heard I've heard good things about the original Frankenstein.
Well,
so do you want to set that up, or do you want to?
I don't know, because I was just thinking about a couple different things. I mean, I think John Carpenter's The Thing had some kind of anniversary recently, and I haven't seen that. I also have really wanted to rewatch Tim Burton's Edward Scissorhands, because like E.T., I saw that movie when I was like much too young for it and was kind of freaked out by it. And having gone back and like rediscovered how great E.T. is, I'm wondering if
you're curious about that one.
I'm kind of curious to see what would happen with.
I've never seen Edward Scissorhands, so
well,
I've never. So maybe. Well, how long is Edward Scissorhands?
Edward Scissorhands like 100-something minutes, like an hour 40. Frankenstein is like an hour and 11 minutes. So
it's
that'd probably be good to pair with The Shining. I haven't seen this movie. I think it could be interesting.
Because like but its imagery is everywhere. Like when you think of what does Frankenstein look like, this movie.
Yeah, and the like movies like before like 1940, I really haven't seen movies before like 1939 is like kind of my cutoff year. Like I've barely seen any movies made before 1939. So this movie came out like 31. This could be really interesting. Let's do Frankenstein.
So we're doing Stanley Kubrick's The Shining and the original Boris Karloff Frankenstein, not Dracula.
Yes.
Jesus Christ. I got my Universal monsters mixed up.
Yes, and this movie was also kind of the basis for Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks's Young Frankenstein. Have you seen Young Frankenstein?
I have seen a shockingly little amount of Mel Brooks comedies.
Young Frankenstein is great.
I might just pick that up on my own.
Okay, good, because I bought that on Blu-ray.
You know what I might do? I might watch Young Frankenstein right after watching Frankenstein if I have the time.
That would be great. You do that. I've seen that movie several times, and I actually just rewatched it recently. So
now you get to see the original. You know, the problem is you're not going to see the original and go, where are all the jokes?
Yes, but this movie is only 71 minutes long, so I think it'll be okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to this.
We will have a fun, spoopy Halloween.
Yes, always. I'm still recording.
Oh, I don't want to say this on camera.
Okay, well. All right, goodbye, everybody. We will see you again next week.